Hey, this is Web3 Talks. The rule of this podcast is simple. We only talk with people who have hands-on Web3 building experience. So if you are a hacker, entrepreneur, or investor, you can get inspired by their stories, lessons, and fuck-ups. My name is Mac, and I'm hosting this pod. If you want to stay in touch, go to twitter.com/Web3Talks, click the link in the pinned tweet, and join our Discord community. Let's go. If you'd like to help this podcast grow, pause for a second and go to your podcasting network, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, doesn't matter, and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks to that, more people will discover this podcast, our audience will grow, and we will be able to invite even more cool guests. So thanks a lot, and if you can do it now, I would be super, super grateful. Thanks a lot. So our today's guests are Sock Drawer Money, known as Sock, and Real Fake Picnic, known as Picnic, two of the co-founders of Code4rena. Code4rena is a DAO that runs security audits contest, where auditors from all over the world compete to find the most unique and rare bugs. They've worked with some big household names like OpenSea and also with many smaller projects. So their idea is that instead of having one company that checks your code, there are tens or sometimes hundreds of hackers from all over the internet getting paid for finding bugs and vulnerabilities in your code. But before we get to that, could you tell us your crypto story?
Well, thanks for having us, Mac.
Yeah, thank you.
My story, personally, I'd been on the edges of crypto for a really long time. Many years ago, was deeply involved in kind of the open web, very decentralized, anti-silo, looking at, I was part of the XMPP Standards Foundation, which was creating federated chat, that was very anti-silo, and was involved in WebRTC early on, and just really had a passion for decentralization and for getting out of kind of the deeply corporate world, and saw a lot of the efforts that people were doing to create standards and everything else completely owned by corporations at the end of the day. Yeah. And had a lot of friends that from the early 2000s, 2010-ish to 2013-ish era, start to see a lot of that stuff, a lot of the efforts people were undergoing at that time slowly taken over by the Googles and Microsofts and Apples, and seeing efforts to build decentralization completely dismantled by Facebook, Google, et cetera. And, a lot of walled gardens going up. Well, honestly, that was pretty disillusioning. And also having been deeply in open source and just seeing how exploitive open source development is, where you have huge corporations basically just building on the backs of people who are doing free work mm-hmm. and depending on, things that they're just not really investing anything into. There's some corporations that put a little bit into it, but compared to what value they're getting, they don't. So anyway, so that's kind of the background of where I'd come from. And I was pretty passionate about that stuff. Also pretty passionate about organizations that worked in a way that was very open, very collective, and very egalitarian. And so when I got back involved with crypto, I kind of was disillusioned on the whole space and assumed crypto was kind of right alongside there, that it was just going to be co-opted by everything else. So I really had no interest. And most of what crypto seemed to me, I had a little bit, but it seemed like mostly speculation. Mm-hmm. Smart contracts, really understanding smart contracts and the value that smart contracts bring, the value that DAOs bring, brought me into the space, but from a totally different angle. So Picnic and I have been business partners on a lot of different things, and we also own a independent newspaper, and which is produced in a fairly decentralized way. And I had been working on trying to find a model that could allow us to build in the way that I was hoping to. Mm-hmm. And really came across DAOs as a unique model in that direction. And while we haven't implemented that for this newspaper, particularly because it's just not really a crypto native group. There's a lot of influential thinking that has kind of worked its way back in. But that's what got me deep into it, was just being fascinated with DAOs.
Mm-hmm.
So shortly after, I don't know, probably about December 2019, I think, maybe, or December 2020, I don't remember which, I started just in earnest looking at different DAOs, how I could join one, be a part of it, learn as much as I could, and came across the massive number of security issues in the space as a part of my research and understanding, and was thinking a lot about that, having had as a part of a previous business an auditing firm. And when I saw Scott Lewis and Zach Cole tweet about the concept behind Code4rena, I was like, that is a winning idea and a very different approach. And that was what sucked me in. So in a way, Code4rena played a pretty pivotal part in me getting deep into the space.
Yeah. And that leads into my story. So, mine starts right after that. Basically, I was CEO of a company that Sock had founded, 16, 17, 18, the years just go by.
Years just keep going by.
Years ago. And it was a company that I had joined up with because I was consulting with them on growth. And I went to visit, and I was just absolutely blown away by the culture, the people. I'd always been independent. Like, there was this line in this old show I used to watch as a teenager that was like, I'm not one of those job people you hear so much about. But I met this team and I just wanted to work with them. And so years later, I won't go into the whole story, but I was running that team as CEO. And we were doing software projects. We were doing creative growth initiatives using software. And then Sock started getting into all of this crypto stuff. And he was telling me about Code4rena and what they were doing there, which is super interesting. But I was thinking, okay, well, that's his lane. That's not really my lane. I'm going to keep focused on this. And then it was I had a very disruptive summer. I think a lot of people lost people due to COVID or whatever. My brother died, not because of COVID, but he was a type 1 diabetic. And when that happened, I think anybody who loses somebody, it just kind of disrupts the way that you see everything that you're doing. And for me, I was just kind of in a weird transitional place. And that is when Sock introduced me to Scott Lewis. And it just happened that Scott is based near where my family is from. So I was there to comfort my mom and be there for her because we couldn't have the funeral yet. And Sock and I went on a walk with Scott, and he asked me, would you ever consider an acqui-hire? And I was just like, whoa, I don't know. And our team, one of the great things about it is just that we really love working with each other. We love taking on really creative challenges. And this opportunity just seemed incredible, but maybe not something that I would have even thought was a possibility 6 months to a year before that. A lot of our team was maybe Web3 crypto interested, but hadn't jumped in. And so it was a bit of a risk. And we talked about it as a team, and we decided that, that's what we wanted to do. So here we are. And it's been, a year and some change. And it's been really exciting being in the space and specifically seeing what the impact that Code4rena has had on a lot of people. So,
it seems that your stories are very connected because you worked together. But Sock, you came because you knew this decentralization have failed before in a way, and you picnic you found a new chapter for growing the thing that you have been already growing before. So sounds like a great start for the company, but I'm wondering, because Code4rena for me was kind of weird at the first glance, because I thought like, who would let, some random anons from the internet audit their code? Like, and I know that it happened in open source countless times before, but like in crypto, it's more, it's all about finance and money. So it's more sensitive, I might say. And, but on the other hand, it's also a project that after you look how it's working and you see the results, you think, yeah, of course it works that way. So it's just like, just like all these disruptive ideas, just like Facebook seemed weird at the start and now it seems like a natural part of the internet. I have the same feelings about Code4rena, and I'm wondering, like, why have you went into that direction and haven't just gone the traditional path, like, let's run a security audit firm, like just like the other ones, and how are you different? Because I know on one side that you wanted to be decentralized and you wanted to check out the DAO thing, but on the other hand, like, it seems like a pretty risky thing to do because it's, the new model. So what's the story here?
Well, I mean, great question. So, I think there's a couple different elements to that. First off, having managed a business that was doing audits and having done that for several years in a very emergent market, I got to see a lot about how really a premium audit firm works because I was partnered at that time with someone who's extremely senior as a security expert, 20 years, has spoken at DEF CON multiple times, has pioneered new exploit methods. Just an amazing, amazing person. And his name's Adam Baldwin, not the actor. And in seeing that space and how audits work, I inherently could tell that this is not a model that works for Web3. It just isn't. It's a model that I think works on the surface conceptually, but the level of risk that exists in a typical project that gets audited by a firm, so a typical web project, not Web3, but just Web2, right? You're talking about, certainly, there are very real risks on that side. But for almost every single risk, the infrastructure exists that has provided a safety net. So everyone has had their credit card stolen. Everyone's had their credit card stolen probably 100 times. People have had their social security numbers, their email addresses, whatever you want that is, the most valuable piece of data in someone's system. Certainly there's the sort of corporate espionage angle of, of there being secrets that people want to keep that are going to be worth a ton of money. But the vast majority of surface area when it comes to Web 2, there's a safety net. We have fraud alert detection. We have the ability to reverse transactions. We have the ability to basically track down every single fund and every single dollar back to a person. There's some ways to work around those things, but they're pretty hard. Well, that's not the case when it comes to the way that smart contracts work. So in a typical audit, the way that most auditors are approaching things, they know inherently that they're not going to catch every single bug. Their goal is to find as much as they can in the time that's allotted to them. I've never met an auditor who's working in Web 2 who their view of this is that they're going to find every single bug that it possibly exists and eliminate it all during their audit. They would laugh. That's not what they set out to do. What they're trying to do is they're trying to do the best that they can, and they're trying to cover the most important assets as best as they can. And that's it. There's a notion that Picnic actually taught me that is just that people have an average number of interventions that they make in a project. So like if you're a copy editor and somebody hands you a piece of paper document to copy edit, you're going to read through that and you're going to make a certain number of changes. And you hand it to another copy editor, they're going to make a certain number of changes. And people just they tend to have a certain number of changes that they're going to make to a document as a copy editor. And it doesn't really matter what the document is. They're going to go so far and then they're going to be like, well, that's it. I'm done. Like, this is as far as I was going to take it. Auditors the same way. So a lot of auditors, you talk to them, they've got a number in their head. They may not say it, but they've got a number in their head of like, well, what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to find like a high severity finding, or like, I want to know that I've at least internalized and thought about the whole way the structure looks. And I want to have read every single line of code and had a good understanding. But the limitation of that is that they have a stopping point. They have a natural stopping point. There's no way that even in weeks of having a pretty long and thorough audit, that a couple people are going to be able to cover the full ground of what vulnerabilities may exist. And when you're working on a timeline, nobody wants to wait for 6 months of security review. By the next 6 months, they want to have version 2 out.
Yeah.
And so there's this natural conflict that I think exists between like Web 2 mentality of like kind of the move fast, break things, and Web 3. So like we've been building on the web for 25, 30 years now. And we have this mentality of like, we'll just push it. And then if there's problems, we'll change those. And smart contracts don't work that way. These are Moonlander kind of like things. You want to have a completely thorough and executed contract when you deploy it and you put hundreds of millions of dollars in it. So the only way to ensure that there is a level of coverage for something like that is to get as many eyes on it as possible, to get as diverse of a set of expertise as possible, and to throw all that at it as quickly as you can in order to align with the incentives that people have for wanting to ship quickly. So from that angle, it's almost that not only would we not consider having a traditional audit firm because I think there's a lot of challenges in just what the nature of that work is. I think it's also very prone to burnout. It's very, very hard and stressful work, and it puts a lot of burden on individuals. And I think in this space, off the charts, the level of burden that an auditor is going to feel when they're talking about, I'm the person who's looking at this, or maybe one of two people who are looking at this, who's going to keep individual people from not losing tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds, if not, millions in some cases, right? So, I think not only would we not consider that, it's that this particular, it needs a new approach. It needs a different approach.
Would you add anything, Picnic?
I would just say that the mechanism that Scott designed is really what got SOC thinking. I feel like this isn't my story to tell, but the thing that actually happened is that SOC is looking at all of these security flaws in the space, and then he sees Scott basically talking about a novel approach to doing this and actually inventing a mechanism for it. And so because that looked extremely compelling and like, wow, that might work. SOC joined on day one. You can say more about that, SOC, but I think that...
That's true. I literally I think I was one of the first people to join the Discord because I saw a tweet and was like, this is a great idea. And I think a week later, after just kind of contributing and, I think I rebuilt the website and helped write some copy and some documentation and helped with some process stuff. A week or two later, jumped in to leading the thing because Scott just reached out and was like, hey, we don't actually have time to run this. Because that's, I think, another angle that is super unique about Code4rena, by the way, is that it wasn't started by people who are wanting to start an audit firm.
No.
It was started by people who had the need to secure their projects. Scott and Zach are involved in tons of projects, both as builders, as investors, and Scott is a mechanism designer that is as good as any mechanism designer. I would say better than any mechanism designer that I'm aware of in the space. And he's always got great ideas for how to approach problems from a unique angle. And they were doing this as purchasers of security services. Now, Zach has definitely knowledge and history as a provider of security service with his previous company, Whiteblock. But the reality is that they were in need of these services. And that's why they spun up Code4rena. The first audit was for their own project. It was for Slingshot. So they're both co-founders of Slingshot Finance. And the first audit was for Slingshot because Slingshot needed to go to market and was blocked by, whether they could get a good enough and enough audits that they felt confident moving in to production with. And so the notion of an audit contest came from that.
Okay. And because this is a model, I know there's like a contest. I know there are like auditors and there are also two other roles that I've read in your docs. But I'm wondering how do you recruit auditors? How do you know they have the skills that are, at the level that is needed to take part in the contest?
Well, that's the beauty of it. We don't have to recruit any auditors. We have a ton of interest. I mean, there are days that we have 50 new auditors joining. We call them wardens, defending the ecosystem. And I think it is because of the mechanism, because of the flexibility, because of the competition, because of the ability to learn and get better, because you can look at all of the audit reports, they're all public. You can learn from things that other people have found. It is just a very compelling space. It's something that people can earn a lot of money. We've had many, many people who maybe had a security background and were just starting to do Web3 security stuff. And within months, they were making a ton. So I don't think finding the talent has been as much of a challenge as you might think, because the incentives are so well aligned in the mechanism. It's just been a completely natural growth. And in fact, that's one of our challenges, is that we have to deal with that growth. We have to deal with like, okay, well, we got 500 submissions for this contest. And so we're incentivized to figure out novel ways to deduplicate, to judge a competition like this, so that we can continue to scale and provide these services on a faster timeline than any auditing company possibly can, and way more value for the money that you're putting into it.
So like, let's say that, my friend has a project and they say, okay, I give like 100,000 USDC for the prize pool. There's a contest. So can I join this contest as like a person from the street, or do I need to? Yeah, so everyone can join.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I've heard from multiple people is like probably a dozen people reach out to me personally, send me a DM and say, this is the best job they've ever had. And different people have said that for different reasons, but a big one that is consistent is that the level of freedom of choice of like, I get to do this or not do it. And I get to decide how much of it I do or how little of it I do. And I know that I'm not the only one, that, there's other people who are going to be looking at this. There's a great quote from a guy that I love on like kind of thinking about community, and name's Peter Block. And his quote is, community means trusting that someone else will be there. And that is a big part of what C4 is, that the very best people don't have to show up and feel like the weight is all on them again, as it usually is. They get to show up and have fun and look for the types of bugs that they want to find, the types of bugs that are interesting to them. And that's it. They don't have to worry about catching everything else, because they know that there's 50 to 100 other people who are going to compete on the same contest. Some of them are hungrier than others. They're just trying to make their way. They may be newer. They may be trying to make a name for themselves. And so you've got more senior folks who can just show up and go, this is the kind of bug that I'm really good at finding. I'm going to spend my time just looking for that. And I'm not going to worry about making sure that I've ticked every single box, found every single thing. I'm going to focus on the things that I'm really good at. The thing that I know about auditors is that the really good ones are much more like artists and creatives than they are people that follow a checklist. The people who find the best and most interesting high severity bugs, they may have a mind that is able to sort of, as C. Michelle, probably our top net winner over time, he's kind of got a mind of a compiler where he basically doesn't use any tools. He just reads all the code and kind of internalizes it. But even still, there is a level of creativity in the way that he looks at exploits. And the same is the case for other people that I've known who are extremely good at this stuff, that they get joy in finding something that is unique and rare, and less joy out of getting the depth of coverage that you would expect from a typical audit, which happens anyway because of the fact that you've got so many people showing up to compete.
Yeah. And really, in terms of, anyone off the street competing for sponsors, it's not a risk, because the leaderboard can tell them if they're curious about something like, oh, should I actually be paying attention to this? They can look at the leaderboard. They can look at the past findings from any particular auditor at all. And that leaderboard serves as proof of merit within the community. And that is something that's unique, but it's also incredibly incentivizing to wardens to get better and better over time.
Mm-hmm. Who does this judgment in the contest? Like, is it part of your team or is it also run by the community?
So those are also independent roles. So each contest has a judge. In our largest contest that we did, OpenSea, we had a couple of judges. And in fact, ultimately, we had 3 judges involved in that one. But those contests, the judge has the role of being the ultimate decider of severity and validity of the findings. And that is something that we treat very, very, very carefully, the independence of that judge, so that, the core team at C4, the staff that are hired by the DAO, we don't weigh in on that stuff. We just are there to provide process and to help clarify what the rules are. And the judge gets to act totally independently. They're paid a flat fee for each contest related to the size of the contest, just for their work to be an independent judge. Those people are vetted by the community. So we have a committee that is what we call our Judge Appointment Working Group. And that committee has 2 very top wardens and one very good warden who's also been one of our most senior judges and who does an outstanding job. That's it's C. Michelle Gerard Pursoon and Alex the Entrepreneur is the judge that is on that committee. And they basically review applications. They review past performance of individual wardens. We also have a lot of sponsors that come in, and after they've sponsored, after say a CTO of a project has sponsored a contest, a lot of times they're really interested in either participating in a contest as a warden or interested in judging. And so there's some of those folks. Ellis Dan is a sponsor who took on the second contest, who brought in the second contest that we ever ran, which was Elastic DAO. And he later became a judge, and he's been a judge for a long time. And, I think that is just a unique aspect of this. The people who end up playing the judge role are pretty senior. A lot of them are CTOs. A lot of them are even seeing this work as something that keeps them sharp and fresh and aware of what the most up-to-date security issues that the community is seeing are. That's a big part of it.
It seems that you are a pretty organized DAO because, DAOs, I've seen some pretty chaotic DAOs. So, and I know that you are not, like, even in your docs, that I think there's the line about being an organized DAO. So I'm wondering, like, okay, how do you manage this project? Like, are you divided in some working groups? Like, how does it work? How do you make decisions and so on?
Yeah, well, I think great question. So having been a part of and tried to run organizations in, say, the stereotypical, like, completely flat manner, one of the things that I've learned is that when you do that, there's 2 things that happen. One is that you place an overwhelming burden on people to have to know a lot of things about everything in order to participate. And that's wasted energy. And the other, which is well described in Joe Freeman's essay that people often cite in DAO land, of The Tyranny of Structurelessness, where there is no such thing as an organization that does not have hierarchy. There is, in any organization that claims not to have hierarchy, there's just a secret hierarchy that's hidden that you can't see. And the fact is that we're a DAO that values expertise, and we don't take votes on how the mechanism is designed. We look for the best mechanism designer in our community, and we give them data inputs, and we give them, the additional perspective of people, and we ask Scott Lewis to help us adjust the mechanism when and where we need to, because why would we outsource that to just random people in the community who have no experience doing that when we've got the best mechanism designer in the space? And the same is the case for a lot of things. We think really intently about the roles that people have, the ways they contribute, and we're very focused on not having a million different things that are, certainly the DAO has as many possibilities as anybody could come up with. But we're really focused on how do we align those with top objectives of the community. And I would really love for Picnic to share some of her approach, because this has been a defining part of how we've structured what we've done, how we've aligned the organization. And she's one of the best that I know in getting a group of people aligned in a direction. So I'll let her share a little bit about her approach there.
Well, just to be clear, I spoke of the acqui-hire before. The DAO hires a team to actually manage the contests. And the reason for that is because contests happen on a very particular schedule. It would be difficult to have a lot of independent people doing all of those different pieces. It has to run smoothly. It has to work.
Trains got to run on time, and it's hard for a fully decentralized thing to have trains run exactly on time. So you need to have somebody whose job it is to show up every day.
Right. And so the way that we align the DAO and the staff that the DAO has hired, and basically any token purchaser, anyone who is invested or wants to participate in Code4rena, is on outcomes. The outcomes are basically behavior change of other people. This is why growth is really hard, because growth requires other people to change their behavior, which nobody can actually control. So by getting really clear on the outcomes that we're looking for, the behavior changes that we're seeking, we can put our effort in the right direction. And the cool thing is that we have so many different roles in the organization that instead of just saying, okay, well, this internal team wants wardens to be doing this, we can just have these outcomes for different roles, and those people can just do that thing because they see, oh, well, if I do this, this is actually going to serve me in my role, and it's going to help Code4rena to grow. So we basically have a set of outcomes that are kind of global, like this is who Code4rena is at its best. This is where Code4rena is going. They don't change very often. They're very, very solid. Anybody can take a look at those and see who we are, where we're going, what we want to be. But on a quarterly basis, we have specific outcomes for that quarter. And we do that by focusing on how do we want to grow this quarter? We have a two-sided market, right? I mean, we could, if you're wanting to get specific, we probably have a multi-pronged many sides to the market. But the main ones are wardens and sponsors.
Sponsors being what we call customers of audits, because they put up the sponsor.
They put together the prize pool, and they offer their pre-production code up for an audit. And a two-sided market is difficult because usually they're not completely balanced. So in any given quarter, we're focused on probably one or the other side of the market, and we have a goal that we're trying to reach. And then we break down that goal into, okay, these are the behavior changes that would tell us like that we are making progress toward this goal. These are the things that we think are going to actually lead to this, and we break those down by role. And then we just grade ourselves every month. I mean, it's kind of a very, I don't want to say a corporate approach, but it is very organized. And the reason is because we want to have shared objectives. We want to know like what we're going for. And we also want to give people room to discuss, like, are these actually the things that we want? Because if those are invisible, then nobody can have a conversation around them. Nobody actually knows what anyone else is doing or what our priorities are. So there's room for discussion, there's room for conversation, there's room for adjustment. And then we just all do our thing toward those goals, and we revisit. I can't take credit for the idea of outcomes. Josh Seedon has a really great book called Outcomes Over Output, which basically talks about most people focus on the projects that they're working on and what they're trying to do. And if they finish that project and it looks good, they say, good, I succeeded. But really, what we should be doing is focusing on the behavior change. If the project that we're doing is not causing that behavior to change, we should scrap it as quickly as possible and say that that was a success, because now we can move on to something else that's actually going to influence this change that we're seeking.
So it seems like you said corporate, but I would just say, it's like a startup that's just like an LTD or LLC, whatever. It's not like a normal company part when it comes to being organized, but you also have this DAO component here, which means that you are not sure if permissionless is the right word, but very open. You have open structure. Compared to normal company, if I wanted to work in a normal company, I have to go through 6 rounds of interviews, some assignments and so on. And here it's much easier. So your net can, get more talents on board because, it's more frictionless when it comes to joining you.
Yep. Yeah, you've got it exactly right.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, you said, Picnic, about growth, about getting sponsors on board. So how do you acquire clients? Because you started as a no-name company doing security audits, which is a pretty hard thing. You obviously had founders that were pretty known in the space, and I think that helped. But I'm wondering, how have you started with customer acquisition, and how do you do it now? What has changed when your name has become more popular? Last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I was scrolling Twitter during the night, which I shouldn't do, but I've done it anyway. And someone was saying, who's making the best audits right now, where you don't have to wait 6 months for getting audited. And someone mentioned Code4rena, and you had, other options had 5 likes or whatever, and you had 30. And it was so crazy for me that you have become such a, maybe not household name yet, but you're getting close. So how have it happened?
Well, in the beginning, I think it was just relationships. Scott and Zach have a ton of relationships in the space, and we started that way. Just people who needed audits quicker than they could get them anywhere else. But over time, it's the results. We recently did a $1 million audit for OpenSea, which is a really good example of this, but this is not the only time this has happened. This has happened over and over and over again, that a project gets a traditional audit because, of course, they're thinking we want the most coverage possible, which OpenSea did, and they got one of the top audit firms to audit their code. And then they did a contest, which was highly incentivized. People looked at that code and were like, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to find anything. Some of the best people in the world who have an understanding of this code, but also of security, wrote this stuff. Yeah, it's $1 million, but we're going to be working hard to find anything at all. And that audit firm had only found 2 low severity issues. So the whole time we're doing this contest, we're all watching it going okay, is this $1 million actually?
Yeah, is anybody going to find anything?
Is anybody going to find anything? And not only did people find things, multiple people found the bugs that were found, 2 high severities and 2 mediums. That is not because the audit firm that OpenSea used wasn't doing their job. They were doing a very thorough job. They're excellent. They are the best in the industry. We have a ton of respect for everyone doing this work, but especially them. It really is the mechanism. If you have hundreds of auditors looking at code who are looking also at that $1 million prize pool, who are also looking at this leaderboard that they can make a name for themselves, you have a very powerful incentive model. So not only are individuals competing, but now security teams are competing for these prizes. So it's just a different thing. And I think that as we continue having results like that, word gets out and customer acquisition becomes a lot easier.
I'm wondering, when you talk about it, because I know that, some security auditors, traditional ones, are former hackers, Kevin Mitnick and so on. So I'm wondering, have you also had people who were hackers, or would you not permit this kind of people to take part in an audit because, they might, just not point out to something and then just to make an exploit or whatever?
So this is such an interesting question, I think, because, one of the things that we got questions on very early was, and you kind of alluded to it earlier. It's well, we're trusting our code to a bunch of anons. I don't know what, that seems weird. Like, how do you ensure that they're not going to just like find something and then hold on to it and then hack it later? Well, very famously, it's been said that Ethereum is a dark forest. And the fact is that once you put those smart contracts into production, they're fair game for anyone. And so most projects that get audited, it's code that's not in production yet, right? So one of the big things that I see, in the space that's very interesting is there's a lot of focus on bug bounties, and there's some huge bug bounties. There's some great folks doing really, really good work in the bug bounty space. Hats Finance and Immunify and many others. And the thing with the bug bounties is that you're finding bugs that are already in production, and our goal is to keep them out of production. But the challenge, how do you trust and know that you've got these people competing in this contest, that they're going to turn in the bugs that they find and not just hold them back? As the numbers increase, the odds of that happening just keep going down.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that we actually had someone who was a competitor for several months and then later was implicated, not in a hack of a project that had been audited by C4, but was implicated in the hack of the index finance balancer pools. And that warden was actually identified through the process of having competed in C4. But when it comes to traditional audits, one of the questions that people have a lot of times is whether auditors find things and then sell them on the black market or, hold on to them themselves. And when you're talking about a couple of people who have a day job, it seems that the risk is probably higher in those scenarios than if you have an entirely open contest. And I'm not implicating anyone from this angle, but I definitely think that risk exists, period. And there is no, but in terms of what we allow, anybody who's implicated in any black hat attack, they're banned from the community. So, that is it instant.
Okay, because it's kind of like a blockchain. Like if you have one person or like 5 people responsible for the code in your case, and in the blockchain for the consensus of the data, it's like, you need to trust these 5 people, and they might make a team and just try to hack it. But like if you have, as you said, like 100 people, like even if these 5 people say, okay, let's not tell anyone about this bug, there's 95 people looking at the same code. So they might destroy their plan because they are not in the same team. And it would be super hard to make a 100-person team and get all the wardens on board. Like you need more than a 51% attack. Like you need, I don't know, like 90% attack to really.
And you don't even know who's competing while it's happening. Yeah.
And as soon as you're doing that as an individual, trying to build a team of collusion around that, the likelihood of you being caught goes up enormously because one of those people is going to go, oh, I can turn this person in. Right. Yeah. So I can turn this person in and get money. So, there are so many things about this incentive model that are like, well, there may be people who have an intent on hacking something at some point who compete, but if they're turning in their bugs, I don't know what to do there. This kid who was implicated in this attack actually turned in a lot of very good bugs prior to this.
So, I can imagine he's pretty good for finding back.
But the funny thing is, he wasn't winning. He didn't, I don't think he found anything that was unique. That's, he turned in good bugs, but the way that the C4 model works is you get paid even if other people submit the same bug. And so, this is a kid who clearly had some chops, but he wasn't the best warden by any stretch. And he didn't find anything that was particularly unique in comparison to what other wardens found. And the other thing that's the case, I think, frankly, is that, you definitely have people who are this kid, which there's a whole profile in Bloomberg on him. You can see that he was smart and ambitious. But I think the vast majority of people who want to participate in hacks, there's a lot of them that are just looking for an easier way to make money. And I think the fact is, like, if you're going to compete in a C4 contest, you know that now, if you're going to look at that code, you know that code is now going to be much harder to find an exploit in than some other unaudited. And there's plenty of unaudited code in the space. So I would say it's a pretty strong deterrent from that angle of warding off.
Yeah. So in a way, if I was a hacker, I would rather take an easier target than Code4rena.
Why would you not want to hack on something that had like 1 or 2 people audit it or none?
Yeah, instead of 500.
Right. Yep.
If your goal is to show how good you are, then show up and compete against those other auditors, right? And you'll get more notoriety like by winning a contest like that and showing your skills there than just speculatively maybe being able to hack something that other people missed.
And then being on the run.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, your whole life.
Yep.
What has been the biggest challenge so far when it comes to running Code4rena?
I mean, I would say it really is the thing that Picnic had mentioned of balancing the two sides of the market. I mean, I would say early on, we had way more interest from the sponsor side and we were growing on the warden side. And then we got to a point where there was a level of like pretty good balance. And now like we have decent interest on the sponsor side, but I think the bear market has caused a lot of people to kind of go, well, we can wait a little bit longer for our audits. But the bear market also has created a lot of people who are like, I'm still trying to make money in this space. I'm still trying to learn in this space. And Code4rena is really an open way for a lot of people to compete and learn and grow. And so the bear market it's kind of interesting because I think in a bull market, we are likely to see a lot more sponsors than wardens, and we'll be trying to ramp up how many wardens we can draw in. And I think in a bull market, the dynamic just changes the other direction. So one of the things that we're doing is we're adding other ways for this significantly enormous talent pool that Code4rena has access to have other ways than just contests. So one of the new things that we've introduced is there is the ability to do private audits. And those audits, there's a couple of ways. So we actually do have wardens who are what we call certified. And those wardens, they're not doxed to the DAO, they're not doxed to our staff, but they're doxed to a third-party organization. And someone described this as kind of a zero-knowledge dox. So essentially, we refer them to a third-party organization. Third-party organization vets that they are, one, unique as an individual and that they're not a sybil of another certified warden, and two, that they are who they say they are, and then three, in doing that, then they're under an NDA and basic agreement to operate with a level of propriety and professionalism. And that group then is able to participate in things that normally we couldn't just have an anon show up and get added to. We're not going to add an anon to if, say, giant brand X decides to do a new NFT project. They're going to want to keep that project under wraps.
Yeah.
And they're not going to want a bunch of anonymous people able to just get into their GitHub repo and see what's going on there. But in this case, we're able to, and we have, I think, over 150 certified wardens at this point. So we can run contests that are pretty significant sized that still are private and have the ability to know that these are all people under NDA and people that have been doxed. And so, and also, the other challenge that exists in 2022 that really sucks is, the sanction world. And OpenSea, that was a big challenge that OpenSea had initially, and they were able to work with us because of the fact that our certified process, has the ability to review whether we have sanction compliance for those folks, because they couldn't pay out anything to anybody. Personally, very, very, very anti-sanction, but there's certain parts of the industry that you're just not going to have access to without compliance. So, and then we also have a unique model where people can hire wardens on solo audits. So a lot of times you may want, a good example of this happened with the launch of Canto. So Canto, Scott and Zach and Ellis Dan, there's a number of contributors to Canto who have been part of C4 but it's a pretty large number of contributors. They're just some of them. But they brought Canto as a project to, Canto is a new L1, and they brought Canto as a project to C4. We did a couple of rounds of audits with them, and they needed some kind of almost on-call access to a warden to be able to review some very small scope changes, right? Some mitigations to some things. They just wanted to have and so what we were able to do is we were able to facilitate private audits for them that were basically 24-hour on demand, where they could get a small review from a reputed warden. And the way that we've got that set up is that the highest ranking wardens get first access to those opportunities. So it creates additional incentive for folks to climb the leaderboard in getting access to these other pretty good paying opportunities.
Okay, so I will go with the questions that I always ask in this podcast. So the first one is if you had a magic wand and could fix one thing about Web3, what would you fix?
I think honestly, when I was doing research on DAOs and trying to figure out the best way that we could set up our systems, I realized pretty quickly that there's a lot of idealism, that execution is a little rare still on a lot of these things. And we're so early. So of course that would be the case. But I think more mature processes, tooling, more DAOs that are able to operate within the ideals that they set out to have. But, we're inventing something new. So of course it's hard. I just, I want us to be there faster.
Yeah, you have a magic wand,
Yeah.
And I'd certainly say I'd love to get rid of the scams. I'd love to get rid of meme coins, frankly, speculation. I think there's so much that's interesting that's happening in the space, but almost all the noise that I think is able to be heard outside of the space is about things that are pretty shady and immature and just pure gambling. And I just think smart contracts are an incredible tool. And the idea of a shared ledger of information that is mutually agreed upon by a large number of people, those are transformative things. And I would love to see those be the things when people talk about crypto, when people talk about Web3, they're talking about those. They're talking about the unique qualities of those, the things that those things add in allowing the creation of new commons. I'm a huge fan of the resurgence of the commons and bringing back the commons, away from just everything being a little private circus, but to something that anyone can share in and participate in. And I would love to see that aspect of things come more and more to the forefront, because I have to say I am a person who had written off the space based on what I saw from a cursory level, from all of those sorts of things. Yeah. I mean, frankly, even Bitcoin to me is a meme coin. I don't it just.
Oh, that's a very controversial statement.
It is. It's just, I wouldn't call myself deeply anti-Bitcoin, but I think the Bitcoin narrative doesn't actually help the real fundamental value of the space. I think there is an enormous amount of interesting things happening in the space. And the speculation, I think, is such a big part of the message that it doesn't need to be.
On the other side of the table, what have been the most mind-blowing projects that you have seen? Something that was inspiring or just amazing or, exciting. It might have been something that's not useful at all, but it was in a way, just a strange way of connecting the dots that made you open your eyes a little bit and be excited.
I would say there's a project called seeds.earth. And I know there's another project called Seeds, but this is not that project. This is it's a regenerative currency, which is super interesting to me. But the thing that I really appreciated when I was researching DAOs was how well thought every single thing is. Their constitution in particular, I printed it out, which I'm not like a paper person, but I wanted to really get into it and understand how they came up with it. It's just really incredible. Their vision is incredible. Their constitution is incredible. Their systems are incredible. The only thing is I've had a challenge like actually getting into it and participating. Like nobody ever responds to the message thing. So anyway, maybe you got to know a guy. I don't know. But from the outside and all of the stuff that is completely transparent to everyone, it's really impressive.
Thanks. Maybe, after this episode, they will DM you and say, okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. I do have a Telegram.
One of the things that really stood out to me as extremely interesting, I mean, Code4rena itself I didn't come up with the idea. So I get to be a super fan of Code4rena alongside other people. I joined because I believed in it. I'm a first follower. I'm not certainly helped it get to where it is now, but I can't claim any of my own ingenuity being, central to coming up with the idea. But, setting Code4rena aside, there's some really simple things that have blown my mind just in the practicality of it. There is OpenZeppelin has a tool called Payment Splitter that is just a contract. It's a contract that you can list a number of addresses and money can go to that contract and then just split in some proportionate way to other addresses. That is remarkable when you think about it from the standpoint of, hey, we're going to do this project, say, and we've got these contractors. These contractors are all taking a percentage of the full project, and not having to have anybody as the intermediary, receiving one payment and then having it immediately split out. There isn't anything like that exists in the current financial world, that just like immediately that everybody can look at the thing and see this is how it works. And this is such a simple thing, right? I mean, this is like probably one of the most basic smart contracts conceptually, but that is incredibly compelling to me. And I think that there's a lot of, Gnosis safe. The idea of people being able to just have a shared pool of resources and be able to decide collectively what to do with them without having to set up a bunch of infrastructure, having been involved in a number of nonprofits and different organizations of different kinds. Frankly, like I know someone who was part of a nonprofit that had a large amount stolen by one of the staff members from the nonprofit. And that money never came back to the nonprofit. The nonprofit ended up going, out of, entirely out of commission. And being able to have the level of transparency that exists, being able to have, spin up a safe and add people to it. I just think that stuff is remarkable and impressive. And I think some of the simplest things are actually the things that really blow my mind still. And then you get into stuff like Pool Together. I find Pool Together to be one of the most fascinating, compelling projects. There's another project called Reserve that is, I think they've done an amazing job with building a really practical solution for countries where they're experiencing enormous inflation by having a stable coin that's available to them in a payment app. And they've kind of taken an inverted approach to building crypto where they're progressively decentralizing it. But first, it's already a practical thing that people, they're doing, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions. People are depending on this as a stable form of currency. I just find that stuff, all of those are just totally inspiring and really cool to me.
Let's come to the funny things. Like, what has been the funniest thing that happened to you in this space? Because for me, apart from the fact that it's interesting because there's like economics and tech and philosophy, sociology, psychology, everything here is kind of intertwined. But it's cool. But on the other hand, it's super fun to be around. And for me, I've been around the internet for many, many years, but I've never found such a funny place as the crypto space. So I'm wondering, what has been the funniest things that happened to you or that you have observed in this space?
Well, I would say at our ETH Amsterdam event at Securium, Hiccup and Sock hosting this live contest was pretty amazing. Like Hiccup dressing up as like Julius Caesar or somebody and Sock wearing this incredible purple suit. It was extremely funny. I think Sock was going to feed Hiccup grapes at this thing, but forgot the grapes. But that would have been really funny. So
Yeah, well, so I mean, the I would actually add on to that. Probably one of my favorite moments was during this game show that we ran at Securium TrustX at DevConnect in Amsterdam, and this was a contest that we basically ran live. So we did a C4 contest completely live. There's a recording out there on the C4 YouTube channel, and what was really just, I mean, I still can't believe this happened so we had two of our top wardens, Leasewood and C. Michelle, going head to head, and Hiccup wrote a contract that he put in a number of bugs in advance. And then they only had like a couple of minutes to look at it and find as many things as they possibly could. Well, the audience, we tweeted the link to the contract, and the audience was invited to just basically play along. And in fact, they had a little bit more time because they weren't also sitting on stage doing another part of the event. But what was amazing was, and I think is really also just demonstrates how compelling of an approach C4 is. So Hiccup has this contract, and C. Michelle and Leasewood are very, very, very good auditors. And they've gotten a little bit of time, and they've looked through this, and they found a ton of bugs in this thing, of course. So that was impressive. And it was just watching them reel these off was pretty mind-blowing. But then we get to the end, and I realized, oh yeah, we said we were going to allow some audience participation. So I'm like, did anybody find anything? And I'm expecting, people to go, oh yeah, I found a couple things. Like I found the things that Hiccup, that C. Michelle found. I found this thing that Leasewood found. I found this thing. But what blew my mind was Anton stands up and is like, I found something that I didn't hear mentioned. And Anton comes from the audience with a high severity finding that he just found sitting like, here's two top auditors going at it. And at this point, Anton, I think, had maybe competed in like one contest or something. And Anton, I think, just recently ended up placing pretty high and having a pretty nice payout in a contest. But he's fairly new to C4 and was very new to C4 at this particular event. And here's two top auditors going at this thing, and Anton just stands up in the audience and is like, "Oh yeah, I also found this other high severity thing that you both missed."
Yeah.
And I think that's such a it's both hilarious and such a good illustration of just how C4 works, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like a pretty eventful thing that you organized back then. So I have only two more questions. And the first one is, do you have any suggestions of builders, people who run their Web3 projects that might be a good fit for the conversation that we had here today? Apart from 0x Saifu, you would be an interesting person for the other side of the security. But
Joe DeLong, I think, is a very interesting character. And I think he would be a fantastic interview. And he's had such an interesting and high profile journey, in being a CTO of Sushi in a pretty intense time period, coming up with some leading a bunch of cool projects, and then eventually, leaving Sushi and now doing, a new project, and he's contributed to some other efforts. But I just find him to be a very authentic person. So, I mean, I definitely would say Joseph DeLong.
I'd say Julian Genesto. How do you say that?
Genesto, yeah.
Genesto.
Yeah, Julian is...
founder of Unlock Protocol. I wished that I'd mentioned Unlock earlier. I think Unlock Protocol is incredibly cool and also generous. It's basically allows anyone to do gated content, get paid for their content in crypto as well as fiat. So you have the option. I think it's a really cool project for bringing new people into the space. And also, Julian Genestu, the founder, is incredibly kind. He's idealistic, but he's also been around for a long time. So he has a very balanced approach to what he's doing, believes in the highest ethos that you could have in decentralization and the things that they're doing in the space. He's just a wonderful example, I think, of someone who is building something with a lot of intention. They have a lot of momentum, but he wants to do it in the right way. And it's just incredibly useful. I know friend of ours, I don't want to dox them because I don't know if they're doxed. Anyway, a friend of ours is involved in that project and uses it for dinner DAO, which is really cool, where people just pool their money together every month and then they decide where to go eat. And then they use the pool to get some dinner and have a good time together. And there's just so many different ways that you can use that. That's just one use case, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I got to double down on Julian as somebody who, I've known Julian from probably...
Yeah, Sock introduced us.
I think I've known Julian for easily 12 years, maybe more, 13. And he's somebody who I just have an enormous amount of respect for in the work that he's done in multiple eras for decentralization, that he has been an advocate for. He has very, very big indie web movement and has continued to just push for decentralization and for open platforms. And he's a very, very protocol-minded person. Just a sweet person. I absolutely adore Julian.
Okay, so the last and probably the most important question is where people can learn more about Code4rena. Where should they go? Is it like Twitter, Discord, Telegram, website, YouTube, or whatever?
Yeah, well, it's all those things. Code4rena.com is code 4, the number 4 arena. It used to be all in Leet, but then people were like 423.
Code 423 and 4.
Right. And then we were all trying to like do our email addresses and giving people the wrong email. So we just changed it.
It's like, all right, we'll just keep one.
Yeah. And our Discord link is on there. Our link to our Twitter is on there. We have a new Telegram group that is like kind of just security news in the space. I don't know how to get on there, but
I don't even think it's been announced yet. So that's alpha.
Sorry.
That's fine. No. I was just going to say best way to find out about that is probably the C4 Discord when it gets announced.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're on GitHub. All of the links are on Code4rena.com.
And all of our past contests, all of our audits, all the findings that have been submitted are all
our leaderboard.
open on GitHub.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you very much then. And, see you, I guess, on Twitter, Discord, website, YouTube channel, and Telegram, and wherever we can meet online.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Really, really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.